Hi, everybody, and welcome back today. We're here today for another WinPeers Weekly webinar, part 2 in the series Global Address Cleansing. Looks like another great turnout today, so thank you all for joining. If you missed part 1 of this series, please go over to YouTube, check us out there. You can find our YouTube channel with tons of great content there. I'd highly recommend you watch the first part in addition to the second part here. Part 1 was a general overview of specific address cleansing problems and solutions. And today we're going to go more into detail into the general hygiene, cleansing, and normalization. So just a quick introduction before we get started. My name is Ben Cutler. I'm one of our solutions specialists here at WinPeer. I'll be your host today. Following this webinar, anyone who registered with us here, you'll get an email from me with a link to the recording and a link to my online calendar. Feel free to set up a time if you'd like to discuss anything in more detail. If you have any interest in a trial version of our software, or if you'd like some more information, please check us out on winpeer.com, or you can email us directly to sales@winpeer.com. Everyone in this call is muted, but you can ask questions using the question box on the GoToWebinar control panel. One thing to point out here, this part 2 is going to run longer than usual between the discussion and the demonstration, but of course we'll leave as much time as possible for any questions that you might have. So today we're going to go into more detail on the general cleansing and normalization, which is part 2 in this series here. Let me just skip over a few slides here. Again, that first part is available on YouTube. In terms of the agenda today, we've already covered the introduction, so we're going to start with a recap of part 1. Then we're going to jump right into some of the most common general hygiene problems, how they affect other processes and outcomes, why you should start with data quality profiling and exploration, and what it looks like to cleanse and normalize global address data using our top-ranked Clean and Match enterprise software. So let's take a quick look at what we discussed last week here. General hygiene, which is what we're looking at today, address verification, matching and deduplication, mail certification, and fit for purpose. So again, that general hygiene, cleansing and normalization, this is generally the content, the structure, and the validity of the data. This is what we're going to focus on during today's webinar. The address verification, essentially that checks to see if the address exists and how accurate your addresses really are. We're going to look at that in more detail during part 4 of this series. Matching and deduplication, if you recall, similar but not exact addresses have to be matched within and across systems for a variety of reasons: master data management, systems integrations, deduplication, searching, things like this. So at the end of the day, is the address data matchable? Next is mail certification, and some countries have mail certification programs or postal certification programs. We do have solutions for this, and again, this is something we'll look at in part 4 of this series. Lastly is just fit for purpose, which is really kind of a catch-all because obviously different business requirements will require different types of cleansing and transformation. The fit for purpose criteria here, this is usually going to include many of the points we just covered, the mail certification, verification, hygiene, things like that, but especially the general hygiene piece, cleansing and normalization. Let's not forget that all of this, of course, is in context, right? This is very domain-specific stuff. Of course, your more traditional, less domain-specific data quality components are also, of course, just as important: existence, validity, consistency, integrity, accuracy, and relevance. Let's start here just by taking a quick look at some of the problems. So the idea here is really to discuss some of the most common cleansing and normalization or address hygiene problems, how they affect other processes and outcomes, why you should start with data quality profiling and exploration, and again, what it looks like to cleanse and normalize global address data with our software. So the first on the list here is spacing, and this is pretty straightforward: leading spaces, trailing spaces, or multiple spaces. The next here is casing. This is when the text doesn't have a consistent standard for uppercase, proper case, or lowercase. The next here is what I refer to as strings. So this is really just a description of the problem. In context, address data, especially your address 1 and your address 2 columns, these are usually longer strings of a less structured text, right? And that's difficult to work with. You know, it's not uncommon, especially in legacy systems, to see complete addresses existing in just a single column. It's also not uncommon to see in-house solutions struggling to parse out this data correctly. You know, if you do any research, unstructured text is known as being the most challenging type of data to work with. So it's really not a surprise that, you know, less sophisticated solutions are going to struggle with addresses among some of the other strings of text, so to speak. The fourth here is delimiters, and in structured data, where data is organized into columns and rows, delimiters are often going to separate columns of data. But at the same time, they're also separating words, numbers, abbreviations, and other things in longer strings of less structured text, such as addresses. So this can introduce a variety of different problems, right? Those delimiters. The next here is what I refer to as misfielding. So spacing and delimiters of longer lines of less structured addresses will often result in misfielding. And so will less sophisticated in-house solutions trying to parse longer strings of less structured text, right? So what this means at the end of the day, some might be able to visualize this, others you know, may find it difficult to. What this means is that you might see a city name in the state column or vice versa. Structuring the text into columns and rows is meant to make the data more useful, more standardized, more searchable, more organized, right? And depending on the severity here, this misfielding can be one of the most challenging data hygiene issues, really just defeating the purpose of structuring the text. Last here is just the nomenclature, which is really just a form of ambiguity, right? So ambiguity such as describing a street suffix like street and also describing it as FT dot, or a city name like Los Angeles and also describing it as LA, or New York City, and NYC, right? Lots of ambiguity there. Lots of different ways of describing the same piece of information. Obviously, this type of thing can be problematic really in any scenario, ambiguity, but especially when we're talking about using data for business purposes, right? So let's talk about some of the effects on other processes and outcomes. We've talked about some of the most common processes: data hygiene, cleansing, normalization, verification, address verification, mail certification, matching, deduplication. We've talked about some of those processes. We've looked at some of the most common problems. So here we're going to look at how you know, some of these problems, if unresolved, can affect a variety of other processes and ultimately your outcomes. Looking here to a Gartner study from 2011, I'm not going to read through this word by word here, but essentially they're saying that data quality is having a huge impact on the anticipated value of all business initiatives. They say data quality is the root cause, and as more businesses become automated, data quality becomes the rate limiting factor for overall process quality. Now, this is especially important and relevant. You think about so much of the automation that's in place today. You think about maybe even, let's say, address verification, how that might be a form of automation. And again, that initial data quality really having an impact on the process quality there. So again, I think this is especially relevant and important for today's topic of the conversation here. We're going to stay on processes and outcomes here for a second. And we're looking here at a variety of data processing activities, reporting, statistics, visualization, analytics, MDM. And you think about something, just as simple as an extra space in a postal code, or even just common word variations like we talked about, LA and Los Angeles. These are seemingly pretty harmless, minor data, hygiene issues, but these are absolutely going to cause errors in data processing, reporting, statistics, visualization, analytics, and a variety of other business activities. So this is absolutely going to have an effect on outcomes. So at the end of the day, better address hygiene is going to give you a stronger foundation to get better address verification results, better mail certification results, better geocoding results, better matching or deduplication results, better MDM outcomes, things like that. All of this is critical to guarantee successful business outcomes, right? So you can take a note on that, one of your key takeaways today. Let's take a quick look here before we end the presentation. Data source quality, data quality profiling, statistics, and exploration. As address and location data gets collected, inherited, acquired, shared, and passed from system to system, originating and moving over the phone, through web forms, IoT, GPS, API, OCR, ETL, web scraping, and all kinds of other data collection and processing technologies. Something that's really key to remember is that the inherent usefulness and the raw value of this data will always vary significantly, right? So this is where that data quality profiling, statistics, and exploration can be very useful to help you to understand these things at the get-go, right? Profiling makes it quick, statistics makes it quantifiable, and exploration makes it visual, so then it can then be validated at a very high level with human eyes, right? So how do we do it? You can see these points on the left side of the slide here. How do we do it? When we're profiling data, the primary checks are going to be to look at the content, the structure, and the validity, right? We can pick out, very quickly and easily a variety of different problems. Our software includes, a very powerful point-and-click data profiling tool. We're going to take a look at this in a few minutes here during the demonstration. Again, this is going to give you some very quick, useful, actionable information about how to clean the data, right? The data quality, data hygiene, general cleansing, normalization, so on and so forth. Next here is source by source and column by column. Of course, you don't need to go line by line eyeballing the data, right? That would take you forever, and a lot of organizations still do that. But you do need to go source by source and column by column, right? Each data set is different, and each column contains different data or different types of data. So when you're profiling data, it's important to go source by source and column by column. There isn't usually a one-size-fits-all type of approach to data cleansing operations. So again, when doing the profiling within the software or the cleansing, we go source by source and column by column. Now, on the right side of the slide here, the benefits of profiling the quality of your data. Junk in and junk out. We've probably all heard the saying. So of course, some data sets are pretty clean and useful, but most data isn't. The truth is that most data requires data cleansing to make it useful. And address data or global address data is really no exception here. So again, the point here, one of the benefits If you're doing nothing about the general hygiene, the cleansing, the normalization before other data, or address cleansing processes, or using that data for other purposes, you're not going to go very far. That data is not going to be very useful for you. So that's benefit number one. Benefit number two is to verify assumptions. And you think about the different projects and data processing operations and things like that. And we always start with a list of facts or assumptions. And models are built, and everyone goes to work, but those assumptions get us into trouble. So doing some data profiling, and exploration to better understand the quality, the content, and the structure of the data before doing additional cleansing, verification, and certification, or before using that data to plot on a map, or put together analytical models and things like that. Obviously, that is going to be to your benefit. That way, we can identify problems sooner, more consistently, and empower you to implement solutions and to take advantage of any peripheral opportunities you might have otherwise missed. Third benefit here is implementing solutions, and a lot of the times this doesn't happen because no one really knows where the problems are coming from or why they exist and things like that. So by doing this data quality profiling as a first step before other data processing or feeding to other business systems, and doing it kind of ongoing, periodically, to be able to pick up on data quality trends, we're taking a more data-driven approach to data cleansing, to the use of the data through better data understanding, better planning, and better execution. Again, going back to those findings from the Gartner study that we looked at earlier. So last slide here before we jump into the demonstration today. I'm going to do a quick time check. Good, so I'm going to pick it up as much as possible here. We're going to talk through just some of the most common cleansing and normalization steps. Keep in mind that each organization and each department will have very different data processing requirements depending on the circumstances. There's really no silver bullet to doing this kind of work. Few questions that come to mind are you working with a copy of the data for limited distribution, or are you updating existing production data, right? Master data. Where is the data coming from and who needs it? What are their requirements, right? Or what are those system requirements? What kind of specific steps might be required to make the data fit for purpose, right? So again, in the context of today's webinar, we're looking at general hygiene, address cleansing, and normalization. So here's just a short list here of some of the more common operations here. The first is removal, simply removing numbers, letters, characters, spaces, strings, or patterns. A simple example of this is a phone number with a country code, and removing the country code, like +1, from that phone number, right? The next here is replacement. So instead of removing, you might want to replace numbers, letters, characters, spaces, strings, or patterns with other data. So instead of removing the +1, maybe you need to replace the +1 with a 1 followed by a dot or followed by a space, for example. The next here is shifting. This is another way to cleanse and normalize data, commonly used with addresses. Shifting essentially moves data to the left or to the right between a group of interrelated columns, often filling blanks. So you can think of a group of 5 address fields, and sometimes you've got blank spaces in address 1 and sometimes blank spaces in address 3. You can essentially move that data to the right or to the left and essentially identify a group of columns there. The next is splitting. Splitting or parsing data can be very useful, especially with addresses. We're going to take a look at that, an example there in the demonstration. So a quick, verbal example here is splitting a 9-digit postal code into 2 new columns, one for the first 5 digits and another column for the last 4 digits. Again, you can split or parse numbers, letters, characters, spaces, strings, or patterns into new columns. Again, keep in mind that longer strings of less structured data, it's more difficult to work with. So in context, again, those addresses oftentimes do need to be split. Merging is also very common. You can merge data from two separate name columns or address columns, for example, to create new single columns, a new full name column, or a new address one column, for example. The last here is standardize, and the word standardize can mean, many different things, especially in the context of data cleansing. In this case, we're just referring to the casing, uppercase, proper case, and lowercase. So we're going to go ahead and transition into the demonstration here. Again, I'm going to try to leave as much time as possible for any questions, but I can see we've got about 9 minutes remaining at this point. So I'm going to work through this demonstration as quick as possible. And if I can't get to questions, please feel free to reach out by email. You'll get one from me following this webinar. So again, we've queued up just some dirty address data here, and we're going to work through this, just a few scenarios here, just as quickly as possible. You can see on my screen here, dirty address list 2. We're at the data step. You can see the primary workflow on the lower left here. We're going to move to the clean step. And again, we like to start with data quality profiling to better understand the content, the structure, and the validity of that data. I'm going to go ahead and start by refreshing the statistics here. And just a bit of orientation here. Again, we're going to go column by column in the way that we do this, and source by source. You can see here on the left here the different columns. We have 5 columns. Following that over to the right, you can see the data quality statistics. And up above, those statistics correspond with these data quality metrics or criteria, right? How filled is it? How many distinct values, right? Trailing spaces, leading spaces. There's a lot of information there. We're going to start with distinct values here, and we're going to look at the administrative area. Essentially, that's the state column, right? And here's the distinct. So we're going to follow this over, and we're going to look for the intersection between distinct and the administrative area column. And if we double click here, we're going to see that data up top, right? We're going to be able to visually validate that using the preview. We can also see the count of how many times each value exists. So CA is going to be the more popular standard in this data set. California is spelled out. And here again, we have some ambiguity, right? 2 different ways of representing the same piece of information, right? So I'm going to show you later how we would standardize something like that. But again, here you can find that information. So again, statistics down below, you can export these statistics to, again, keep your eye on, potential data quality trends, for example, or for simple checks and balances before and after doing some data, cleansing type of activities and things like that. But you can also, it is fairly interactive, and you can double click in most of these cells and you'll see the information up top here. So we've looked at distinct values. Let's go ahead and look at the postal code or zip codes. And we're going to follow this over to letters, right? So that intersection between letters and postal code. So you can see a 7 here. If I double click, you can see that up top. Why are we seeing letters in a postal code that seems to be mostly numbers? Well, a lot of the times, and again, this can be from can't think of the name, OCR, let's just say character recognition. A variety of different reasons here, legacy data, ETL processes and things like this, fat fingering, a variety of different reasons where you might see an O in the place of a 0, right? And that's essentially what we're seeing here. We're picking that up because again, we're profiling the content, the structure, and the validity of the data. So here we're able to see letters in the postal code field. We know we're working with US data, shouldn't contain any letters in that field. So again, this is essentially a flag to us. We can take a look at that. We can do some visual validation up top, and later I'll show you how to correct something like that. We've looked at zip codes. Oh, also think, just a quick example here. Think of trying to plot something like this on a map, right? We talked about how, these general data hygiene issues, these minor data hygiene issues can affect processes and outcomes. Think about trying to map something like this, to plot something like this on a map. Obviously, that's going to cause some issues there for you. Let's go ahead and take a look at the address one field and multiple spaces. So you can see we have, again, the intersect here. You can see we have 11 records with multiple spaces in the address one field. If we double click down below, we can view that information up top to better understand what's going on. These are blank spaces, so, see, they're a lot of the times they're easy to miss, but you can see them here. You can see those blank spaces, those multiple spaces, and I'm going to show you how to correct those, right? So again, very actionable information from the data quality profiling. This will help you to better understand what kind of normalization needs to be done to better prep that data for subsequent data cleansing processes and for general use of that data, right? So let's go ahead and look at the data cleansing and standardization. We're looking at that up top here. Again, we've got some information now about what needs to be done. Now we can go ahead and set up some rules to actually do that work. It's very simple. It's mostly just point and click. Again, we go source by source and column by column. We can also create templates. You can see that up here at the top: clean, load matrix, and save matrix. So these are templates. These are clean matrix templates. So any cleansing rules that we set up down here, we can also save as a template and reuse those templates, even edit those templates on other similar data sets. So that should save you a lot of time. Again, you can see the most common cleansing and normalization functions at the top here: remove, convert, standardize, split, merge, word manager, shift. Let's stick on remove here for a second. Now, we talked about multiple spaces in the address one field. I like to click down here, I like to click here. It actually, the software tells me where to go. So again, multiple spaces in the address one field. If we follow this over, the software says it's here. If you want to remove that, you can, right? We're on remove. We're going to remove multiple spaces, maybe even, again, non-printable characters, maybe apply that to all columns, leading spaces. We'll get rid of a few other things while we're here, trailing spaces, right? But again, what if we want to remove multiple spaces? And again, if you look down here, you can see the multiple spaces in the address one. Once I run clean here, it's going to update this information, right? It tells us this column has now been cleaned, right? So you can be very, very confident that, that you've done your work there. Let's go ahead and take a look at convert and zip codes. We talked about or postal codes. We talked about O's in place of zeros. And again, something very common. We can go ahead and clean that up very easily. Again, down to postal code, letters, select the option up top here, run clean. The information is updated down below here, and it's very quick and very simple. Again, everything that we're doing here can also be saved as a template, right? We talked about splitting longer strings of unstructured or less structured text, right? Strings of text, such as addresses, right? So you look at an address here, and again, longer string of less structured text, right? This can cause a lot of different problems for you, right? It'd be nice to have some of this data in its own column, like an apartment number, for example. It makes it more organized, more searchable, more standardized, things like that, right? So let's go ahead and move over to split. And again, in this example, very quickly and very easily, we're going to use our very well-developed splitting technology here. We're going to take the addresses that exist, and we've got some missing information, partial information, unstandardized information. We've got some misspellings here. And we're going to go ahead and just apply a few check marks here based on the type of splitting and the column types. We're going to run clean. That applies that change. We can also see those new columns over here in the profiler, so we can check to make sure that it worked. How filled are these columns and things like that. We do the same profiling after we've run that. But you can see here we took this information here and we standardized it, right? We split it into new columns with smaller data points that are more manageable. So very, very powerful stuff here. It's street number, building number, house number, street name, street suffix, apartment information, follows over. We've got columns for post office box, city, state, and zip over there to the right there. So lastly here, we talked about, we saw some misspellings in the city. Looks like it exists quite a few times there. That might be something we want to clean up. We also looked at the two different ways of describing the same, state, essentially, right? The same piece of information, how that can cause problems. So we're going to take a look at the word manager here. And I'm going to start with locality, which in this case is just city. And I'm going to move over what we have there. And I thought I had one more if I was not mistaken. Okay, that's fine. I'm going to go ahead and make a quick replacement. We're going to make 7 changes here very quickly and very easily. So again, this is the word manager. This is word replacement. We can do replacements. We can also delete. There is an option here for operators if you want to get, kind of more advanced. Also, any rules that we create here, we can save and load to other data sets. So again, it's a template making your life easier and allowing you to do this type of work much faster. We're going to go ahead and save that. We're going to run clean. And again, you're going to see that change being made. Big, broad strokes, bulk changes to be able to clean up that data. The other example here again was the state. So again, we have CA and the state name written out, the complete state name, California. So we're going to make a big broad stroke change. You can see it down below. We're going to change CA to California. Again, you can see the count here. We're going to make 99 changes in this case. So again, working with big data, you're probably going to make many other, not 100 changes. You're probably going to make many more. I'm going to go ahead and run clean here. You can see the data being updated, and my work is done. So I'm going to stop it there. We're a bit over schedule at this point, and I don't want to take anybody's time away from their day. So again, I want to thank you all for joining. We're going to take next week off to prepare for parts 3 and 4. I hope you'll join us for parts 3 and 4, where we're going to be looking at matching and deduplication of addresses, global address data. And again, the address verification, the mail certification, geocoding, and some of the other things that we can do. So please stay tuned, register, save your seat. Really appreciate your time, your attendance, your interest in this webinar series. Please reach out, respond to the email if you want to set up some time, you have some questions. Really appreciate it. Thank you, everybody, and have a great rest of your day.